moving right along in our series. We're now on to block number 3. This one is the log cabin, and it's a really popular old-fashioned one. It looks complicated because you have so many layers added to it, but it's actually really simple once you see how it goes together. So the pattern here, because it calls for a 12.5 inch and paper only comes in 8.5 by 11, I didn't print the templates out, but you can, if you want to use templates, you can use the numbers here to actually cut out your own templates. But once I show you the modern method, which is really the only one I'm going to go through with this time, it's going to be a lot easier, and you're probably going to follow that anyway because it is so much easier. So all of the pieces are here showing you what you'll need. It actually, when you piece it together, goes backwards, and so you actually start with the center here. So this is H, and then G is right here, and then you start working your way around and you make it a spiral. So first one, second one, third one, and third one. These two are the same length even though they don't look like it. And then the E is this one and this one, and then D is this one and this one, and then it goes to C, which is actually your very last one. So I don't know why it put it right there in the center, but you actually go up to B, and then you work your way around until you get to this very last one right here, and that's the last one you actually strip together. The easiest thing to do, I'm not going to go through cutting on most of the blocks from here on out because I've shown you the basics. Unless there's something really weird, then I will show you how to cut it, but if it's just basic strips or something like that, I'm just going to assume that you know how to do that. So with this one, 2-inch strips. Just cut a whole bunch of 2-inch strips in the colors that you want. And so you'll need more of your darker colors or whatever you choose for your outside colors than you will for the inside, of course. But follow this and just strip it and make a whole bunch of 2-inch strips, and then you don't really have to worry about your length, and then I'll show you how to fix that whenever we get to it. Log cabins are also a great way to use pre-cuts. So this is a pre-cut roll. It's 2.5 inches. They come in different widths, and depending on what company you're getting it from, they have different names for it. The most common name for this is called a jelly roll, and it's because it looks like a jelly roll. And so not every company calls it that. Moda, I believe, is the one that calls it a jelly roll, and that's just the manufacturer of the fabric. And so each company has a different name for this, but there's all different jelly rolls that you can get. And what it is just pre-cut things, and you get it the width that you want it, and then you don't have to worry about doing all the strips. You already have your strips cut. And so that's just an option that's out there that makes life really easy. Because of the size that we are doing these, it's a little bit odd, and so the centerpiece is actually not a 2-inch square. So that's the one thing that is not a 2-inch. You do have to cut a 3.5-inch square for your center. So let me show you how to put something like this together. So the biggest tip I have for doing things like this that have a lot of different colored strips is put them in the order that you're going to use them. And so I've chosen to start with my blues, so that'll be the first thing that I do. And the way that a log cabin works is you do your lights in both colors. So I'll do 2 rows of this, and then I'll do 2 of this, and then I move into my mediums and I do 2 of the blue, 2 of the red, and then I'll go into my darks. So 2 blue, 2 red. And I wanted my centerpiece to pop, so I chose a yellow. You can do whatever colors. You can also make it completely scrappy, and they don't have to have a specific color set. I just really like the look of having the blues opposite of the reds, and it just seems to be a little bit more striking to me. And then if you're doing an entire quilt in log cabins, you can set it to where it looks like a big circle and things like that in red, and then a big circle in blue. And I think that's really interesting. There are a million variations on the log cabin to make it look like different things just by changing the colors. But the way you put them together is always the same. So let me show you how to get started on that. So to put them together, you start with your centerpiece face up. Then you're going to take your first strip, you're going to put it face down, and you're going to line it up to one edge. And then you will go ahead and sew along this edge until you come to the end of the yellow. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of the yellow, so now I'm just going to stop. I'm going to cut my thread. And so now what you're going to see is you've got that there, and you can see where it ends right here. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it kind of flat so that I can ease right up to that yellow, and I'm going to trim off that blue to be flat against the yellow. And then I'm going to go iron this down really fast, and I'm going to go outward the entire time. And so that way I just know where I'm going to put the seam. So I just know the next one's going to flop down, and I'm going to keep doing it around in a spiral. So now I've got this one done. So this was my H, this was my G. And now I'm going to start, and I'm going to do the exact same one over here. Now you can change this up if you want, but I like it to where the same fabrics meet right there. And now I'm going to go down the other side. And this time I'm covering this blue and I'm going over the yellow. So now I'm going to lay it flat again. And this time I'm going to trim this one off so it's straight that way. And now I've got that, and I'm done with this color. So I'm going to set this aside. I like having extra strips so that I know that if I run out of room on one, that I'll have extra and I don't have to go cut some more. So because that was my light, I really didn't need that much of it. So now I'm going to do my light red. So again, that stuff's not trimming for some reason. So again, I lined it up with this blue here and down through the yellow there. And now I have my first part of this done. And so I'm going to turn it this way again, trim it. And you can also use your rotary cutter. You might be a little bit more accurate with it. Because you are putting so many seams in here, it's really common for the log cabin to have slightly wavy edges. But again, those get put into a seam allowance later, so it generally isn't a problem. And so I like to just keep my stuff organized that way. down, and now I do my next one. And so you're constantly going to the next side and working your way around in a little bit of a spiral. And so now I'm going to go, this one's got to be a little bit longer since I'm covering the red, the yellow, and the blue this time. But I'll line it up to that corner and line it up to the edge and I do my seam. Are getting threads that long. Oh. Now you notice that my bobbin wound up right here, it got all wadded. That means there's something going on with my machine, which I need to look at. Usually that's a tensioning problem, but this should have automatic tension. And so I will have to look at it and see what's going on with it. And also you notice I just cut that kind of jagged. I am going to take the time to make sure that that's pretty straight because I don't want it to be, I don't want to have to line up later to something that I already cut crooked in the first place. So give me a minute to look at my machine and I'll be right back to show you the next steps in this. Okay, so the issue was I didn't have my bobbin threaded right, which it's a miracle that anything sewed, but it worked and now hopefully it's where it's supposed to be. And that brings me to another little pro tip. It's super nice to have your trash can next to you, your wastebasket, the stuff that you're actually going to throw out, but don't ever put anything but fabric scraps in it. Because there will be those times where you're like, man, I don't want to waste any of my good stuff, but I really need to test something out. And I can just reach into my wastebasket because I know that it's only got fabric scraps in it or the random piece of paper. I don't ever put food or anything like that. A, I don't want pests in my craft room, and B, I don't want my stuff to be gross, because that way I can grab like this little selvage that I knew I was never going to use for something else, but I could stitch over it and actually test out my machine. And so just a little pro tip. All right, so we're back to here. I just sewed this one on, and so I still need to iron it down. But this is where I kind of start getting lost sometimes. And so if you're not really paying attention, or you've done like 50 of these and you are just kind of in the flow and then your brain zones out for a minute, it's kind of easy to forget where you're at with what you're doing. And so I know I started with my really short one here, so I can always count back to here. And so even when I look at my finished one, I can tell where I started because I can look for that little shorty. And so this is my little shorty one. So I started here, and then I went here, and then I went around here. And so if you absolutely have to backtrack and go like, what am I supposed to do next? Always find your shorty. And so first one, second one, third, fourth, fifth. Now I do my sixth across here. And so that's going to be my blue one, the medium blue. So now again, this time I grab my medium blue. And if you notice you did a weird trim job on the edge here, always go with the length to make sure that you've got it kind of straightened up. And so you can add a little extra here and know that you're just going to trim that off whenever you're done. And so that's also in that rotary square. The square ruler for the rotary cutter is really handy, because if you are wanting to be extra particular with this and make sure it's absolutely straight, you can square it up every single time you go around, and that'll make sure that you're really square when you're done. So now can kind of feel where that fabric ends, so I can just keep my finger where I know I need to be and then just make sure it's past that needle so that I know when to stop without having to really watch, because you're not going to see it except for over here. And so if you feel it with your finger, then that's a good way to make sure that you actually finish off your edge there. So now I've got that one on there. So now I'll trim it up. And I like trimming it this way because I can see exactly where my line is, and just make sure that you've got everything good and flat to itself and trim down. And then I forgot to go back and trim this one, so I need to do the same thing there because I want everything to be as straight as possible. All right. So now I'll rotate it one more time, and now I put my next blue along here. And that little bit of string that I'm leaving there, it's not that big a deal, especially if it's just a couple stitches. You can pull it and it just pops right off. So now I'm done with this blue, and I move on to my reds. So this is my medium red. Oh, and you gotta do it face down. And I do want to take that back out. So with that one, I didn't feel like I did a very good cut, and it's going to be really short anyway, so I just kind of did an overhang on both sides. That'll be fine. I'll just trim both edges. Make sure I've got it good and lined up. So now I'm done with this medium, and I've just got 2 more colors to do. And so I'm going to flip this over and trim that down. Now I'm onto my dark blue. something's happening with my tension again. So this I definitely have to rip out because for some reason my top tension is leaving these loops on the bottom and my bottom tension is a little too tight. So I don't know what's going on with that. And so I need to pull these out, get my handy dandy seam ripper, and with this it's going to be really easy because it's so messed up. And then I should just be able to pull that bobbin out, and then that means since I pulled the entire bobbin side out, then this just peels right out. And I'm done. So let me figure out what's going on with this again. It's almost always the bobbin, and so I'm going to test that first, make sure I've got it in there right. Again, each of your machines is probably completely different than mine, and so you have to get used to how yours is threaded and how your bobbin should be sitting into the bobbin case. You can always check the manual. Most, if you don't have the manual to your machine, you can actually usually Google the serial number, and a lot of companies have put theirs out in PDF format, so you can still pull it up without having to go and buy a new one or something. And that's also part of getting to know your machine, is getting to know what it sounds like. So I should have known something was wrong when I put the foot down and it made that little cranky noise. But I just went ahead and sewed through it anyway, which was actually kind of a terrible idea, but I wanted to get done. And so you'll get used to how it sounds, and especially how it sounds when something is going wrong. So okay, I've got this one, now I'll do this one. See if that's long enough, and it is. So I lucked into that one, I didn't have to have another piece there. But I probably won't be so lucky the next time because it does get bigger. Okay, so now I'm done with my dark blues, and now I just have my dark reds to finish up. This one has the selvage on it, so I don't want that on there. And so with that one, I will have overhang on the front because I don't want to line up to that because I just snipped it, and when you're just snipping, even if you're being very careful, you're going to get it a little bit off. And so I want that to overhang a little bit up there, and I'm going to make sure that this long edge is straight. this one will probably be short, so I'll need that second piece. And I didn't trim that one edge. Go ahead and do that. I did a terrible job of that, but that's okay. That one I can square up in a second. So now I've got my very last piece. So I've got dark blue, one dark red, and now I need this one. And so this piece is a little too short, so I have to go to my second piece. Okay, so now I'll trim this one little last piece off. And then that is how you make a log cabin. Like I said, there's a million different variations on this, so this is a good skill to have to understand how you work in a spiral like that. Because just by changing up your fabrics, you can make a completely different look to your quilt. So look at different patterns that you can find online or in some books somewhere. We have a lot of quilting books at the library, so you can always pull those for inspiration. And just see what other people have done, and then let your imagination go. Pick something that you like. Everyone's gonna have their own design aspects, and that's just personal preference. And I do like to follow patterns from time to time, but usually I like to make my own off of someone else's. So I like to see where they went with it, use their ideas and their patterns, but then make it more my own. And so I'm very rarely getting kits and stuff like that where they already have the colors picked out, things like that, because what I find beautiful from someone else's is not really what I find beautiful out of my own. And so just feel free to experiment. And I have found that 9 times out of 10, even if you don't have what you call a design brain to where you feel artistic, if you look at it and your brain says, yeah, that looks pretty good together, I like that, after a while you'll start seeing that you do have some form of a design thought process that is purely your own. And that's usually the best thing, to really put yourself into something. And then if you keep it, great, but if you give it to someone, they can really see you in it. So change it up, try some different things. Occasionally things are gonna look horrible whenever you thought, oh, that's gonna look fantastic. And that's fine. Things like that happen, and you can always just learn from that, throw it away, hide it if you don't want anyone to ever see it. But it's fun to just kind of try to put yourself into all of this. And so don't feel like you have to follow my exact patterns, things like that. You can change it up however you want. So if you want all of this to be the exact same color, great, do that. See what it looks like. And there's just a million different things that you can do with these. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have questions, remember my email address is laura@slingcountylibrary.org. See you next time.